Welcome back to Hannity. More on the allegations that CNN blackmailed the user who created the anti-CNN Trump wrestling video. Senator Ted Cruz actually tweeted out earlier today that what CNN did could be illegal. Joining us now with a reaction, Fox News anchor and attorney Gregg Jarrett and Senior Vice President and Chief Strategy Officer of the Export-Import Bank of the United States, Anthony Scaramucci. All right, Anthony, I'm going to start with you. You, I think, more than anyone, have been a victim of CNN's fake news. You're a fighter. You took them on. You proved them wrong. I mean, they actually allege that you were under federal investigation for having some collusion with Russian officials. An absolute lie. You had to put yourself to the task of making it clear that it wasn't true. You could have sued them for a fortune and owned half the place. Why didn't you?
Well, a number of reasons. I mean, as Gregg was pointing out at the break, they mitigated the damages, but I also didn't think it was the right thing to do, given the fact that, I've had journalistic experience. I know that people make mistakes.
This is huge. It's one thing to make a mistake, but to identify you as under investigation.
But I see myself as working for the President of the United States, and so what is in the best interest of the President of the United States is for us to stay on the air and to prosecute or execute his agenda, to explain his economic policies, to explain his national security policies. And if I had gotten into a lawsuit with them, Judge, it would have led to me getting taken out of that position of advocacy. And so for me, if you weighed those two things, that was way more important, because at the end of the day, I serve the President.
You have always been very rational and very reasonable, although I suspect CNN is not playing in your home.
No, I actually, I don't want, because I love Fox so much, but I mean, I'll tell you what, you have to watch them because it's like the Red Sox watching the Yankees. It's like part of your scouting experience, you know what I mean?
All right, Gregg Jarrett, all right. You've got Ted Cruz saying, hey, look, CNN should be looking at the Georgia statute because this is extortion. I mean, it's like blackmailing. And what he's referring to before we get into the statutes is the fact that they said, look, he's apologized after they dug him out. He's apologized. He says he's never going to do it again. He apologized for everything he's done his whole life, and if he does it again, though, we're gonna expose him. Even though we know by exposing him, he is subject to it's a danger. I mean, the guy is in danger now. A lot of threats. What are the statutes?
Think about what CNN has done. They have said, if you, Mr. Reddit user, do something that we don't like, we're going to publicly expose you to contempt and ridicule and scorn. That's a violation of the law, and Ted Cruz is right, only he cited the wrong law. The real straightforward law of coercion says you can't threaten somebody to coerce them into abstaining from otherwise legal behavior. It's an absolute crime.
We're going to put this up so our viewers can start looking at some of the statutes that you're referencing. The first one is coercion.
Right.
And in coercion, you're talking about New York law.
Right.
And under the guise that CNN has offices and does business in New York.
And the reporter is based in New York, so there are plenty of contacts in New York, so that's the relevant law. Then you also have a federal law. It's called conspiracy against rights. And it basically says you can't threaten and intimidate somebody for using their constitutional right to freedom of speech under the First Amendment.
Which is very similar to the New York law saying you can't prevent someone from doing what they have a legal right to do.
Exactly.
By instilling in them fear that if they do it, you're going to subject them to hatred, contempt, or ridicule. All right, so then we've got the federal. But for the federal law, the feds would have to prosecute.
The feds would have to prosecute, except that, and you'll note as it's up on the screen, it requires a conspiracy.
Two or more people.
Right. But this reporter didn't do this alone, because contained in his story is the editorial statement policy. So clearly more than Kaczynski was involved in this story, thus the conspiracy, thus a violation of the federal law.
And the Georgia statute that Ted Cruz referenced.
Yeah.
I think it can apply. I know you don't think so.
A little bit. Theft by extortion of property, but under Georgia law, unfortunately, property is defined as personal and real and not your identity.
Yeah, but at the same time, I mean, the courts are becoming a little more...
you could stretch it.
Yeah, engaged in applying it to contemporary times. Now, Anthony, in terms of CNN, in terms of their coverage, what do you think is going on at CNN right now?
Well, I think it's a cultural thing, and so I think what's happened there is, for whatever reason, they're chasing the president like he's Moby Dick. Management there is Captain Ahab. It didn't end well for the captain or the boat at the end of the story. And so sometimes when you lose sight of your moral compass and your grounding of what you need to do in terms of your editorial coverage, you're running amok now. And so hopefully this will bring the pendulum back for them, and there'll be less than, say, 93% negative coverage, Judge, on the president, because I think people are starting to tune them out as it relates to what they're saying about the president. So I think that's been effective for the president this week.
But given the fact that there have been so many media corrections and retractions, it makes it clear, I mean, I would think the average viewer, that, you know, this is coming from on high. Not everybody's going to violate journalistic standards, you know, so that they can just get a story out there. It's almost as though there is this prophylactic, we're going to protect you if you know, destroy President Trump.
I think there's a rush to get these stories out without verifying the sources, without double-checking the sources. But I think the good news is the bombs that have hit them recently will hopefully bring them back into some more journalistic-oriented standards, more objectivity, Judge. And if that happens, that's better for the country, better for the president. I think they have to give him a fairer shake on that network, and I think people are going to demand that now.
Greg, what is the person who posted this GIF, as they call it, what is he thinking right now?
Well, he's scared. You know, he doesn't want to be publicly exposed. He doesn't want his family and his neighbors and everybody to be converging on his home because he's at the center of this controversy. But the real controversy rests at CNN. And Anthony's right, his comparison to Captain Ahab, whose hatred robbed him of all caution and reason. He became the personification of fanaticism, and that is CNN.
For those of us that didn't take English literature, that is the guy that chased Moby Dick all over the place. Okay, right. Herman Melville wrote the story,
and it led to his own demise.
But it is a sign about hubris and pride and ego overtaking you and making you lose your judgment.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for both the literary, legal, and the educational input on this story.